Welcome to Restoration Beyond the Couch. I'm Dr. Lee Long, and in today's episode, I'm joined by Eric Wood to discuss a topic that's more important than ever: mental health in college students. Together, we'll explore the unique challenges students face, the growing need for mental health support on campuses, and strategies to foster resilience and well-being during these formative years. Join us for an insightful conversation packed with valuable perspectives and practical advice. Your path to mental wellness starts here. Well, welcome, Eric. Dr. Wood.
You can call me Eric, but thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. So your role at TCU, Texas Christian University,
Yes.
the I was going to say the one-time almost football champion, but I probably shouldn't bring that up, should I?
Hey, like we said, everyone else was home, so we got to play for a national championship.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, yeah, you are the head of the mental health department. How do you describe that?
Yeah, so I'm the director of the Counseling Mental Health Center.
Yeah.
So I have about 20 people on our staff, which is a good number for a student, about 13,000, the student body. So yeah, we're the student counseling center pretty much. And so as part of the tuition, students can come and see a therapist, just for a wide range of things.
And so you all have developed, you had a vision. I remember this vision. It goes back to like 2018, I believe, is when we started talking. So I know your vision has to go be well before 2018, but we talked and you had the brilliant idea of having providers on campus for students so that there wasn't a burden on the university to have a multitude of trained staff that could cover all types of different concerns or issues, but to have different providers that are not part of TCU be partners with TCU and provide this on campus. And we kind of kicked this off with the DBT program, the dialectical behavioral therapy program. And so can you talk us through like where that vision came from and like how it's grown and what you've seen? Yeah.
So it's just part of the model. And it also is a collaboration talking to other schools, just they don't do the way we do, articulate the way we did, but it's a fact. Like most people don't think about college mental health. I know there's a lot of expectations on like what schools can provide, but we are a school. We're not like a treatment community, and that's not the goal, is to be a treatment community. The goal is to be an institution of higher education. But on the same time, college students are a high demographic for pretty much anything. Name it. Second highest demographic for suicide attempts. A lot of things emerge or escalate during 1825.
Right.
And so we do have a really high kind of, need for services. But the ideal is just kind of looking at, okay, we have colleges, we don't have the programs, but we do have the infrastructure. We do have the access to the students.
Right.
You don't have to build a hospital. We have all the technology right there, but we don't have the programs. And that's by design, because we were not designed by that.
Right. You're higher, like you said, you're a higher education institution.
Yes. But we're fortunate to have a lot of treatment centers are the opposite. They have the programs by design.
Right.
They have a program that's specifically designed for students with high mental health needs, but they don't have the access to the students. They don't have the infrastructure. They don't have the things that we have. So the ideal is, why don't we just build a bridge? Instead of trying to start all over or invent the wheel or anything, why don't we just build a bridge? And that's one of the aspects of our model. And that we go to a treatment center and say, could we use your program, but use our resources and access? And then that way, the ideal is that students who have high mental health needs, they were still taking a lot of our resources.
Right.
If you look at the national study, most counseling centers spend about 50% of our sessions on 20% of clients. And those are the students with really high mental health needs. Maybe we refer them off, maybe they go, we don't go, but someone's always worried about them. There's always a safety check. There's always, crisis walk-ins. So we're spending so much time on them.
Yeah, it eats up you, and not to say it eats up, but it really does dominate a lot of the university's resources when
Yeah, we're spending 50% on 20% of clients.
Right.
And then you have these other students who that's what we were designed for, normative developmental concerns, who can't get in because we're doing it. So the ideal is, instead of hiring new staff, again, what would that do? You know, if we have the same scope of care, we don't have the programs. If you give me new staff, I'm still, you know.
And the interesting thing all of that to me is that, and what are the outcomes?
Exactly.
If you are spending that, what are the outcomes of that 50% of the time?
Yeah.
Are there positive outcomes?
I mean, in the old traditional way, like, no, they weren't getting treatment, and they would just, you know, have this cycle of coming to the counseling center, doing a safety check, maybe referral off campus, not going, you know, and we were just spending a lot of time. And yeah, there's a high risk things, negative outcomes could happen.
Right.
But if you imagine those 20%, if there were programs for them, you know, if there was something that they could go and they would get in treatment, and the counseling center staff didn't have to do it.
Right.
Yeah. What would be the outcome then? Would that trickle down to having less after hours on call? You know, would that trickle down to less hospitalizations? Would that trickle down to make it easy for the dean of students? Would it trickle down to the counseling center? Because when we have 50% more capacity, see more students, there was just that thought, like, what would be the trickle down effect? And we've shown that, yeah, it works. Like, if you do that and you do things for the 20%, the trickle down effect is phenomenal.
The trickle down effect for the university is phenomenal, not to mention the trickle down effect
for the students.
Yes. I mean, I remember our first year, or our first cycle, I should say, of our DBT program on the campus, where I think I'm remembering this correctly, that we were sort of a test case. And what we found, the data, the outcome data that we found, was that the students learned the skills, which was fantastic. I mean, they're a university student. They're there to learn, right? Education is their purpose for being there. And they were learning the skills that we were teaching in the DBT program. We found that their incidence of self-harm dropped. We had no one who self-harmed while they were in. We had no hospitalizations. So we had people who were repetitively hospitalized in the semesters. They were not hospitalized. And this one was the thing that, I don't know why this was a surprise to me, but it really was a surprise to me. And when I look at it, I'm like, duh, their grades went up.
Yeah.
Their grades went up because their mental health was being handled or being addressed, and their grades went up.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And not to mention, because that first pilot, I think we had 24 slots, and every student that we gave you would have been a student that traditionally would have been either referred off campus or would have taken medical leave.
Right.
And I think we kept 22 of them of the 24 in school.
That is right.
Yeah, stayed enrolled.
That is right.
And yeah, we just had so much indicators that was good. Like you mentioned that one student, it was a junior who said every semester they were there, they had been hospitalized.
Right.
And they were not hospitalized, and they were in that program for a year.
Right.
And then they graduated. And,
right.
You know, and so, yeah, the outcome, that was just, you know, proof of concept, like this is really working. Because not only, like I said, because you had all those outcomes, but our counseling, our staff saw more students. We saw more other students. There were less hospitals.
Lower acuity students, right?
Yeah,
students with lesser concerns, just the more the typical type of things.
And we had more space for them. Wow. And then our, because, you know, for us, if someone goes hospital, our campus police goes. But we had less patrols, which means that they had, you know, less time being off campus. You know, they could spend more time on campus. So again, that just goes down to the trickle effect. And then you imagine the parents, you know, I mean, the parents were excited because the students are staying in school, and they're doing well. The grades are going up. And these are students that had a history. I mean, every student we saw on the pilot, the counseling center would not have been able to, those students were, all of them were beyond our scope of care.
Right. Yeah, because their level of acuity was barely at the edge of outpatient versus inpatient. Yeah. And inpatient takes them away from what they're there for.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. They think all counseling is the same. Like, oh, there's a counseling center. It's all the same. And it's just like, no, you really, like, a doctor can't treat everything, you know?
Right.
You know, that's actually unethical. So it'd be unethical for me to say, you know, the 13,000 students, the counseling center can treat them all.
Right.
Like that would literally be unethical. You can't promise that, you know, we're not that good. So the ideal is, like, some people put those expectations, we'll just go to the counseling center. Where the question is, does the counseling center have the ability to treat them, because if you don't, then kind of what's the point, So we really had to look, how can we expand our scope of care? And you could build your own program, hire a bunch of staff, but why would you if there's a treatment center who already has the program that you're looking for? It's a lot less expensive.
Yeah. So this has been, so the pilot was, am I right to remember it was 2018?
I think it was right before, because I've been at TC since 2007, became director at 2019, which is right before the pandemic happened.
Right.
But before that, we did a pilot. So it was on the air. It carried over to 2019, but because I was back in that summer. So
Yeah. And so for the last, this program has been rolling for now 5 years.
About,
So what are some of the things that you've seen in these 5 years, and what? Yeah.
Again, you had to think every student that we refer to you would be on a scope of care. So you can make it in terms of retention. Most of those students, at the very least, probably would have taken a medical draw for at least a semester. They might have come back, but at least their academic progress would have been interrupted, and their graduation delayed. So just that alone is worth it. To sit there and say, like, every single student that we've done every semester probably would have taken a medical draw and left the school.
Right.
And you are able to keep them. Because there hasn't been that many students in the program that had to leave. Like, most of the students stay in school and complete. So that is definitely amazing. But the thing is, there's so many unknowns. Like, we're not going to know, like, how many of those students didn't attempt a suicide,
True. Because we can't prove a negative. Right?
Yeah, you can't prove a negative. But those are the students who were at risk for it.
Right.
So it's very likely that we save lives, or at least, attempt suicides. That's very likely. Or substance use, or relationships. There's a lot of things that we just never know. But we do know we have this huge group of students now who've been treated. And you know better than I do, DBT carries a whole life. So what is the future impact? Not only did they stay in school this year, but they use the school for the year after that. They probably use those skills when they get married, as a parent, as a coworker, employee. So we'll never know that, but we can say, we hear the students and say this program is amazing. And of all of our programs, the DBT is the one we hear the most positive feedback about.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, because I guess emotional regulation, and we hear from parents. Yeah, you're changing people's lives when you do that. And and it helps us, because when y'all do that work, we're free to see more students.
Wow. Thank you for that. I didn't know that. I know that when you go back to the idea of outcomes, I've recently published an article in the Cognitive Therapy and Research Journal, and
when the pandemic hit and when the shutdown hit. And so if you think about that, that is formative years, of a lot of relationships and the way you think about the world and things like that. And so that cohort now has this frame of reference where they were doing a shutdown during his formative years. The world has been hostile for them. So they don't know what it's like not to have wars, not to have a pandemic and everything like that. And then they transition a lot of them to a new school the next year, into high school, all that stuff. So we are definitely seeing, like, 2008 is different, because before, right after the pandemic, there's a lot of separation anxiety. There's a lot of disconnect.
Sure.
And now we're seeing the people who are in junior high, they have a fundamentally different view of the world, which makes total sense.
Right.
And we expect it for the next couple of years that way. When people in elementary come to college, it might be a little more stabilized. But for this cohort, for the next 3 or 4 years, if you think about where they were when the pandemic hit and how that formed their, view of the world, the view of relationships, the view of themselves, how they handle emotions. Yeah, these next 3 or 4 years is really important for college mental health, just because of that developmental lifespan. So we're definitely seeing that.
You're so right. That's so interesting to consider that this, because you're saying the graduating class from TCU of 2028 is
the income.
Incoming. They'll graduate in 28 is what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. And so that the impact of the pandemic in their development, and we're seeing that in college now in the mental health landscape.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Deborah Ackison was here a week or so ago, And she was talking about how we have exclaimed that the pandemic is over, and it's like, but do we recognize the impact that the pandemic has had on us? Or do we just shut it down and leave it behind?
Yeah. I mean, it's a global trauma, just even the shutdown, because that altered, if you look at the definition of trauma, that altered it, even the shutdown did, because, all the Samhsa definition and met with it. But yeah, it's one thing if you're an adult, you cope with it, because maybe you lost your job, you got a new job, in relationships. But when you were a junior high and that happens, and it's a formative year, it changes your whole perspective of things.
Right.
But yeah, it's just like, as therapists, we all went through the pandemic too. And so institutions, higher education, I mean, we tell all the time the student body is going to be fundamentally different. It's not going to go back. There's going to be a different type of student. And that's just the way it is. It's huge world history. You see it in other history. When World War II happened, the college students were different, So you see anything that affects the globe is going to affect it. Like we say, what affects you as a person affects you as a learner. And so
it makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I love that. That's so interesting to conceptualize it from that perspective, because that's not just TCU.
No, it's everyone. Yeah.
That's the landscape of university students. Worldwide. Wow. Is there any other trends that you see that on the mental health landscape?
I mean, in terms of mental health, anxiety as opposed to depression and things like that. But I think right now, the other kind of global thing, I don't know if you heard about the demographic cliff, So right now, it start next year, there is literally less 17-year-olds on the planet now than there's ever been.
Oh, right.
And it goes down from 10 years, like 7-year-olds, it sounds like the distance is great. So we know about 10 years. There's literally less of them. It's because my generation had less kids. So there's literally going to be theoretically less college students, and it starts next year. And so you're already seeing some of like the directional smaller colleges close in enrollment numbers, but people are thinking, okay, what is that going to be the impact of that, of just having fewer college students? Because now colleges, a lot of them are having budget constraints, cutting this. So it's now, most people think like the big state schools and elite private schools would be okay. But if you look about just the, Southwest, they're struggling in enrollment. And so some people think, how's that going to help, the student support? Because you definitely need that. And one of the things that's also interesting is how people pick colleges. It used to be for academic reasons. Why I want to pick college for this. But now there's been such a shift, of people thinking, do you even need college? You not. But now the number one thing I just heard, I think with Gallup poll, that people are picking college based on student support. Like families want to know what is the life of the student going to be like on college. That has surpassed academic reputation now. So then that with the demographic cliff, you would think that a lot of schools, are thinking, well, how do we support our students now, since there's going to be less of them, and that's be a priority.
So do you see this? Do you see other universities trying to race to the race to the party and try to create?
Oh yeah, you already see it. Like if people are talking, that's why a lot of people look at TCU, because we have a lot of things at TCU.
Absolutely.
But that's
and a lot of. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but not just a lot of things at TCU, but there's a lot of proven entities at TCU. Where you have kept, I know we keep data because we want to understand outcomes. I mean, just as an organization, we all want to know what our outcomes are, because that's great if everybody feels great and wants to sing Kumbaya after we end a session. But at the end of the day, what do you take with you? Yeah. That's what's important. I mean, yes, it's important to have a good feeling at the end, I guess. But it's the what, like you said, are we impacting you down the road?
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was saying, that's huge for us. Because, when we started, it was such an out-of-box, new thing.
Yeah.
And so, we were very careful what data do we collect. We do have a network of schools. I've talked to government, went to Austin, even talked to, the Surgeon General in D.C. and all that. And, you need to have the data. Yeah. To say that this actually works, because that's our goal. I told my boss when we first started, I want to change college mental health, because if you think about the mental health epidemic of America, where would you start? And, when I talked to government officials, I said, start with colleges. It's not the end all be all, But yeah, you have an infrastructure, like you said, you have people, we have the buildings, we have the technology, we have the access to the vital demographic. There's not a lot of systems that have that. And you can do so much good with so less money.
Right.
But just collaborate, don't build new things, just collaborate with things that are already there.
Yeah.
And that message has resonated, but that's the question of how you know it works. And we've been doing this for 5 years, and we have all the data. We can talk to students. We have all the things. And of course, it just makes sense. Like the programs that we have, like you and the other treatment centers, again, these programs were designed for students with mental health needs. So they're a lot of evidence-based, a lot of validation. They're not like these new, out of nowhere, programs. It's just no one's ever thought about it. It's like, oh, we have the infrastructure, they have the programs, let's just combine them.
Yeah. When you, and I want to come back to something that you said about the U.S. Surgeon General. I want to hover over that for a minute. But when you approached me about this idea, I thought, oh my gosh, how brilliant is this? Because we would always market to you all to say, hey, we're here. We have a relationship. We love to work with this age group. And when you said, well, why don't we create a partnership? I thought that is one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard.
Well, part of it is neat because, some of the time, some students, they'll never go off campus.
Right.
Because they have all these questions like, if I go off campus, who am I going to be in group with, or is it, like we have donors that pay for it, they can't afford to pay for it. They don't have a car. They can't even get here.
Right.
So there's a lot of barriers to that. But when you put it on campus, it just reduces a lot of the barriers. The stigma, like you're only going to be in group with
other students.
Yeah.
Right.
And we do it to support you in academics. That's why we're really big on fundraising, because then we can say you don't have to pay for it. Right. There's no out-of-pocket cost. We try to take the excuses away, or the barriers, I should say, away. And this is the best way to do it, is on campus.
Yeah. It truly is your heart for the college students.
Yeah.
It's really evident. So let's go back to the Surgeon General and let's hover over that for a minute.
Yeah.
Tell us more about what that meeting was about.
Yeah, well, we're going to get a new Surgeon General, obviously, but the last one, he is very big on mental health. I don't know if you've read anything about the Surgeon General, but social media, impact mental health. And most Surgeon Generals, they'll pick a cause, but a lot of them is like physical,
Right.
So if we have a Surgeon General say mental health is going to be his cause, and he wrote a book on loneliness, that's just his platform. So, it was a think tank in DC, and he was presenting at the beginning, and I was actually presenting with the former director of, or Secretary of Health and Human Services at the last panel. And so we were just talking, and he was, he kind of agreed, college, and he's done college tours. Like not because of me, I'm just saying he kind of gets it. But I've done stuff. It was just like September, I did like a 1-hour briefing with the White House Office of Science and Technology. And they just wanted to talk. And they said, this is like, it made sense. Like they said, they like how you're doing because it will cost less money. Like they were just thinking in that way. I've been to Austin, talked to the behavioral health coordinator councils. And that was a good example because that was a couple of years ago. But just to give you an example, there's the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, is all the department like health services, it's like their leadership. And like one of them was substance use council, and they were talking about a campaign they were running at the time, and they had difficulty getting into certain parts of Texas. They can get into the Dallas area, the Houston, but like the El Pasos and all the rural areas had a hard time into. I looked at that, and I was president of our state association. I was like, there's a school on every single part of the map that they are saying they can't get into.
Right.
So I was like, would you send me that? And they said, and I just sent it to all the directors. And I remember she said, you accomplished more in 5 minutes what we did in 2 years. And it's just, again, people just don't think it. She's like, I never thought about working with colleges. Like she tried to reach out to like professors and things like that. But it's right there, but no one really has thought about that. A lot of schools don't even think about working with especially rural areas. There's mental health authorities. A lot of schools don't even think about working with them.
Right.
So, and now if you look at it, there's a map now. We actually helped out with mental health authorities. They have a map interacting with colleges, so you can see how close these colleges are and see that was because of us. It's just people never really thought about it. Like it's right there. The demographic is right there.
Right.
But people just never thought about partnering at the school.
And it's so interesting because it's like what an overlooked demographic, right?
But it's the vital demographic. That's the thing. The 18-25 is the demographic that most people are worried about the most.
Right.
You know, I mean, obviously you want earlier, but people don't get confidentiality until they're 18. Right. So it's like really effective.
Well, and consent, informed consent. Then you have to you're always concerned about the parental informed consent.
If you get younger,
and when they turn 18, it's like they get to choose on their own.
Yeah,
and
then try working with high schools or bureaucracy or working with independent school districts. Right. It's like because we've had some people try to use us with high schools, and it's just like I don't even understand the red tape there. But with colleges, you don't have that,
right? Because they can choose for themselves.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really neat. And so am I right to recall that the Surgeon General gave you an award of some sort?
No, not the award. I'm trying to think. We've gotten a lot of recognition. So like we wrote an ebook, and that was because I was inspired by Ardona because all the stuff we were doing, you know, we did a webinar, we had like 100 schools show up, you know, and everyone's asking, what do you do? So I just put together it took like 6 weeks to write, you know, it wasn't that hard. It was just about what we did, a philosophy. We have 4 different objectives, put it on a website, and I donated all the money. You know, I was like, okay, this would go to the donor fund. And that won an award. That won a national media award, and it raised a lot of money. Like some people buy one copy and give like $10,000, you know, it's just like, wow. Because all the money goes straight to the students. So there's no bureaucracy, which is good because you don't have to be $1 million donor.
Right.
You know, if you want to give a couple $100, you know, that goes a long way in this.
Right.
So that got a lot of attention.
Is that still available?
Oh yeah. If you go on the Counseling Center website, so counseling.tc.edu, there's a tab like in the about, it says ebook.
Okay.
And if someone goes in there, we ask like for $25, and that's kind of tax purposes. Like you have to market it above the market value, if that makes sense, because it's a donation. So if you say $10, it's just you bought a book. Yeah. So you have to market it above to say it's a donation. But it's not uncommon that somebody will go and like you see, oh, here's a $500 for one copy.
That's really neat.
And it's like, wow. But they know it's a fundraiser.
And the neat thing to that is that every time somebody gives above the market value and they give the $500, that's a student could get a number of sessions out of this. And you may be the difference. Like you donating that, you may be the difference between somebody living and potentially committing suicide.
Yeah. I mean, we've had students that this program kept them from permitting suicide. We have a huge stories of students saying that, and they tell their parents that, and they tell us this, that. And, even other schools, they'll say the same thing.
And so now so currently you were invited to be a guest columnist to Forbes magazine.
Well, yeah, I started. So it's a contributor to Forbes.com. That's like the official title. It just so happened because we were getting a lot of national press, a lot of this, and it's kind of serendipitously, like one of our TCU national marketing people used to work for Forbes. And she was like, yeah, Forbes should write it because, you know, they're a business. They do a lot of other stuff, but they had never done a thing called mental health.
Right.
So we had a couple meetings, and they were like, yeah, try it, you know. So I'm maybe a contributor. So you can follow me, Eric Wood, just on Forbes. And it's all about college mental health and emerging adulthood. It just started like in September. So it's a kind of a new column, but so far so good.
I will tell you, I'm enjoying the heck out of it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Every Friday. It comes out.
Yeah. And I get the little email that says,
and I told you I want to write a piece about emotional regulation DBT. Yeah. Because I think every school should do that. I mean, think about the impact. What if every school had a DBT program available to its students?
Yeah, I think every school, if every school even had a required course for all their students to learn emotion regulation and interpersonal skills, you know, distress tolerance, emotional regulation, and the interpersonal skills, I think we could slowly begin to change the world.
I think you could. One thing about the class is the students are paying for it, you know. They pay for the class. So if you do it our way, they don't have to pay for it.
That's right. No, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. And so what's been have you had feedback on the Forbes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like I said, it's like it's relatively new, just a couple of weeks, but they let me do it every Friday, you know. And every once in a while I'll do like a special issue. but just the fact that they're doing it, you know,
Yeah.
just the fact that Forbes has in the college mental health is out there. And even like to have mainstream, like I, you know, interviewed a couple of counseling directors about, there was like a whole thing about ranking counseling centers, and there was like pros and cons to that. So, you know, so you get to lead a lot of experts and to really kind of give, and it's on the website, so it's there forever, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a good experience. It's been fun. I've learned a lot, you know, just doing it. It's not a long read, you know, it's only like 1,000 pages, you know, so it's about maybe 2-3 minute read.
1,000 words, not pages.
Yeah, 1,000 words. Yeah. 1,000 pages. Yeah.
That's
so-
War and Peace.
yeah. So it was War and Peace. So yeah, as long as they keep telling me to do it, I'll do it. So
That's really neat. I love that there's a spotlight on mental health, but also for this age group, because this age group is, this is the training for our future generations. And I often think that if we overlook the generation of that's in university, regardless of the time frame, whether it's the Gen Z or whatever comes, I don't know what comes out before or after Gen Z.
digital natives, millennials, there's so many words.
Yeah, there's so many of them that, you know, somebody was saying to me, I don't want to be irrelevant when I'm 60 in the workforce. And my response to them was, the only way we're irrelevant in the workforce when we're 60 is if we have ill will or disdain for the generation that is 2 generations below you, or 2.5 generations below you, because they're the ones coming up in the workforce. And they're the ones that it's at that point will be the rising superstars, right? Making decisions and things like this. And so it really is a care for that generation that's up and coming.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people work in college mental health, why we work in college mental health. Because people's like, oh, you can do all this other stuff. But I mean, 1825 is also like when things emerge is actually the best time to treat them.
That's right.
And a lot of times people will say for us, like you can see the different trajectory. Like if they have this family history and let's say something happens and they get treated, you can literally see they're on a different trajectory. And it's easier because most of them aren't married, you know,
Right.
they haven't really done career, you know, they're talking about school. So the consequences are less. And so a lot of people who work in college mental health will say that's one of the reasons why it's so fulfilling, because you know, like, oh, it's more tangible to see, like this person's on a different trajectory. And so, yeah, the ramifications for their future family, future everything. But that's what we do individual. But yeah, think of it as a nation or, you know, as a globe. If
Right.
we thought, you know, yeah, there's other areas. I'm not going to say this is an end all be all, anything like that. But if you really put a focus on the 18, 25-year-old, yeah, I mean, it might take a couple of generations, but you will make a huge dent
Right.
in the whole epidemic of society.
Yeah. And like you said, the malleability of that age group, like the
brain's not even forming. So as to say, it's literally easier to treat.
Right.
If you can get treated right now, yeah, if they wait 10 or 15 years, it could be more ingrained. The body's, you know, the brain's more formed. Now they're talking about child custody, their marriages, but you get them before they have any of that, you know?
That's right.
And so it's literally easier. In colleges, like I said, it's probably the easiest time to access. Like literally most of the college students live by us or they travel by us every single day. You're not going to get that community provider. Like if you're working out there, you're not going to literally be able to just drive by a counseling center.
Right.
And see a licensed professor without ever taking out your wallet, a licensed professional without ever taking out your wallet, you know?
Right.
Like, all they do is show us an ID, you know?
Right.
So it literally is, in terms of access, I think probably the easiest time to access.
It's the easiest time to access. It's this building this bridge. Once it was built, it just makes all the sense in the world. I feel very honored that we got to be the pilot study. And I also feel honored to know that that there's such a beautiful positive impact that you guys get a lot of good feedback. That's super honoring. One of the things that we love to do is, any advice for our listeners, because, you know, restoration beyond the couch, it's, you know, do you have any advice or do you want to leave any points for our listeners that you think, gosh, this would be really helpful for them to consider, think about, know?
I mean, all different types of advice. I mean, the things that we're talking about, like, you know, we talked about parents. And yeah, it's funny because especially with this generation, a lot of times parents, they lose the fact that they're still the number one influence on the students' lives. If you look at all the data, I know the attitudes some students give their parents, trust me, I've seen it. And students, parents seem to feel like they're hopeless and lost, with their kids because there's so much other stuff and they'll speak a whole different language.
Right.
But I know from personal experience, people look at the data, what is the number one influence on the student's life is going to be their parents.
That's worth like hovering over for just a moment. Because I think that you're right, that as parents, we lose the idea. We lose the notion that as a parent, we still are the most impactful relationship.
Yeah. Oh, we hear it all the time. And parents, like, I don't know how to say to approach my student. And when I tell them the process is more important than the content, just the fact that you just went and tried it, even if it's awkward, and
because it's going to be awkward.
And even if you stumble, even if you don't know what to say, the student's going to remember that. Like my parent tried to have this conversation. So the process is definitely more important. But the one thing the stat that I tell all the parents is, for colleges or us, and we literally keep track of it. And every year it's about around 85% of students say they come because somebody asked them to. Like, it's very rare for a student on their own to be like, oh, I'm struggling.
Wow.
Let me call the counseling center. Like, that just does not happen. And you can say the same with other counseling. Most people will think, oh, it's right there, just do it. No, they don't. They usually will suffer in silence for way too long until somebody sees them and says, you need to get help. And most likely the parent is the best one. Faculty is good, RA is good, but a parent to just reach out. And like I said, if you notice anything change, that's a green light. People look for signs, like they're all going to look like all the lists of red flags, but you're a student. If there's any reason for you to be concerned, say something.
That's such a great point, because I think as a parent, you don't always consider that, that student, know your child well. And if you see anything out of the ordinary, that I think that's very wise to point that out to parents, is you don't wait for there to be some red flag on a sheet that somebody's written of, they're talking this way or they're saying this. You know your student, know your kid.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times a parent has said something, just made an observation that they just looks different, and it wasn't on any red flag, but that was like, oh, like that was
the point.
Yeah. Wow. And because the parents, they have that history, they literally know their student longer than anyone else.
That's right.
So they're the expert on their students, but sometimes they lose sight of that and they look for red flags, or they defer to us, and it's like, okay, yeah, we're professionals, but the students. So, but again, most students will not come to us, counseling centers, unless somebody nudges them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They just don't pick up the phone and be like, I'm depressed.
Right. They're not interpersonally aware. No. They don't, I think most of us don't carry around a real deep sense of self-awareness. Yeah. And I think that age group is still developing that sense of self-awareness. And so you're right.
Yeah. And they need a nudge. They will not just like go to counseling. They need a nudge, someone to be like, hey, sit them down and be like, we're really concerned about you. Yeah. Here's a resource on the campus.
Nice.
So that is the biggest advice I could teach to a student. A lot of students, parents, want to know how to help out, because we're seeing this other schools. Like, I was a president of our state association. There is some talk of all of our state association doing this. I give you a new flash for the Big 12 schools. We're working on a suicide prevention collaborative all together. Nice. I'm on the national board. So this is changing, and so a lot of people who, it's like, well, how can I help? Yeah, if you go and the ebook's a good way, because it goes through that. But it's also a model of other schools, and we've done stuff to help other schools too.
I think that's neat, because you're right. This is a national, international issue, especially after the pandemic and the trauma, the global trauma we've all experienced there. And mental health has become, I think it's deteriorated. It was deteriorating prior to the pandemic. Oh, yeah. And to me, I always say, I think that the pandemic lit that on fire.
Oh yeah. And there's no stats that say it'll go back. Everything's saying it's going to accelerate. And mental health is not a political issue. Like, people talk about the vice. If I talk to Republicans, I thought Democrats, everyone's interested in this. Like, there's not someone said, well, we don't care about the mental health of college students. Like, no, no one says that. It's an issue that I think everyone can get on board with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming by and for keeping us updated on all of this. And thank you for the partnership.
Yeah.
And thank you for setting up the bridge that helps the programs and universities cross into helping college students have a better shot at a deeper sense of mental health.
Yeah. And I would say just a thank you to you because, obviously, we have partnerships and we vet them. And I tell people in the vendors, because so many times people look at colleges as dollar signs, like, oh, money, money, money. And the one thing we say is like, we really look at someone who want to be a part of the team, who really gets it and really has a heart for it. Because so many people are like, oh, I have a program. And, they don't understand, like, again, your program is hiding, but it wasn't designed for colleges,
Right.
We is for just the colleges. So the fact that your heart was just so passionate, like this is about the kids, it's about the thing. And yeah, we raised the money for donors, but, the vendors out there is like, it's always, because I get solicited all the time, and it's always discouraging when people talk about, the money, the volume line, and it's just like, it's not about that, like you said, you really could make a huge impact on people's lives. Mm-hmm. And like, like we did things different, like, like even our risk manager, it was like a new idea that freaked everyone out, and it was like, oh, we have to do something. And we asked you to make accommodations. It's like, it's a different world out there.
It was. And I think every attorney there probably has a little more gray hair as a result of this program.
Oh, you can imagine the first time.
But they caught the vision.
Yeah. When I first brought it up, I thought I gave my a heart attack or something. But again, it was just a mindset they saw as a liability. Now they see it as a protective factor.
That's right.
And so for all the vendors who want to work with schools, so many times they overpromise, and they say they do this and, and they're like, oh, I think you're struggling. And, and like, I get funny when people like, oh, well, you must have a wait list. Like, we don't have a wait list because we have all these programs, Right. And they go and they think they can do all this and save. And it's like, no, it's a team effort. Like no one thing can, solve everything,
Right.
And so just the idea that you have a heart working with us and like, we don't want to feel like we're not business partners. You're like, you're part of our team.
Right. And that's what it feels like.
A clinical partnership.
And at the end of the day, look, the dollars and cents have to make it, the money has to make sense.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point is we want to see college students, because our moniker here is celebrating restored freedom. And we want to bring that celebration of that restored freedom onto the TCU campus. We personally feel honored to be a part of it. Because like you said, there's aspects of this that we had to flex with, and you guys flexed with us, and it is a collaborative team effort. Because what is healing? Because part of the pandemic was the isolation. Yeah, like you said, the Surgeon General wrote the book on loneliness, and that's a problem. What have we done? We've built a community.
Yeah, exactly.
We feel like we're a part of your community, and I hope you all feel like you're part of our community.
And that's and that's what you need,
Right.
And just to have that heart out there, because like a lot of schools is still new to them.
Right.
Like the ideal of like, they'll say, we're a school, we don't do this. And they still think it's a liability. So we're easing the narrative, like, no, this is a protective factor, you do a lot of good, but we're very careful about who we partner with.
Yeah.
Because we really want people with a heart, and you have that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you found value in our discussion and wish to uncover more about the fascinating world of mental wellness, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes where Dr. Long will continue to delve into empowering therapies and strategies for mental wellness. Your journey to understanding and embracing mental health is just beginning, and we're excited to have you with us every step of the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and remember to celebrate restored freedom as you uncover it.